We are gathered here on the traditional territory of the signatories of Treaty 7, and I'd like to acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who also share a very deep connection to this land. Albertans, and especially those in Calgary and frankly throughout southern Alberta, love their Rocky Mountains and also understand how important they are to their fresh water. And the vast majority of citizens have been deeply opposed to any kind of coal mining that would wreck any of that pristine nature. But as soon as the UCP got elected in 2019, they started looking for ways to go against Albertans' wishes and open up the eastern slopes of the Rockies to coal mining. Now, first they denied those kinds of plans were being worked on, and then when they were finally caught, they defended them. And then, as we got closer and closer to the 2023 election, the UCP pretended to relent in the face of public pressure and suggested that they had, in fact, reversed their policy once again. But almost immediately after the election, it became obvious that that, too, was a lie. The UCP ordered the reconsideration of a project that was supposed to be dead after multiple denials by the courts and tribunals. And it's been so difficult to get the truth on what's been happening that a few years ago, ranchers sought out all the information they could on what coal mining on the eastern slopes could mean for them and their multi-generational ranches. They filed a Freedom of Information request to our government. And now, 4 years later, the courts have ordered the UCP to actually comply with the request that the Freedom of Information legislation be respected and that the government release all of the records around coal mining. And so today we're here to reveal new information related to this most recent chapter in the UCP's long history of dishonesty and secrecy when it comes to coal mining in Alberta's Rockies. So let me start just a bit by reviewing how we got here. Now, as I said, the ranchers filed a FOIP request back in 2020 when the government refused to disclose any information. And then, as a result of the government's refusing to disclose information, they then went ahead and appealed to the Freedom of Information and Privacy Commissioner's Office. Back then, the commissioner ordered the release of all the documents, which at the time the government had described as including 6,539 pages. But the government still refused, and instead only handed over 622 pages, or less than 10%, which were also highly redacted. And when I say highly redacted, I mean 80% of what was received was basically blacked out. So these ranchers, who just weren't the type to give up, went to court, and they won at that level too, with a decision around the issue being released just last week. And the court said, just as the privacy adjudicator had, that all of the records had to be released. The judge said, and I quote, "Every Albertan is entitled to a broad right of access to the records of their government. This is an essential pillar of a functional democracy," end quote. Now, as a result of the scathing decision made by this judge, both me and members of my caucus raised this issue in the legislature last week. Danielle Smith told the Legislative Assembly on April 16th, quote, "We will abide by the decision of the court. We obviously have had a change in leadership in this file, and we will make whatever documents available that the court requires," end quote. Upon hearing that last week, we thought, wow, after 4 years of fighting, these ranchers who were standing up for Albertans' best interests would finally get access to these documents that they deserved. Turns out, though, that Danielle Smith was lying on April 16th. At the end of last week, the UCP government informed the ranchers that they will not be releasing any further records. And yesterday, at noon, the ranchers were told that the UCP government was going to be further stonewalling them and, in fact, appealing the decision of the courts. This is shameful. To share more about that, I'll turn things over to my colleague, Sarah Elmeligi, the Alberta NDP Critic for Environment and Tourism.
Thank you, Rachel. Let's remember what's at stake here and what's been unveiled by the 622 highly redacted pages the government has reluctantly handed over. The UCP started ripping up the coal plan in October of 2019, and by May 15th, 2020, it was official. Unsurprisingly, the UCP announced this without any consultation from municipalities, environmental groups, or First Nations. By February 2021, the UCP received so much public backlash that they were forced to claim they'd reinstate the 1976 coal policy. Yet, in typical deceitful UCP fashion, they didn't really reinstate anything because they had an existing 420,000 hectares still available for open pit coal mining on the eastern slopes. That spring, in May, after promising a full-fledged public consultation on their plans to open up the Rockies to Australian coal minings, the UCP restricted the consultations to ban Albertans from discussing topics like water and land use. On June 17, 2021, the Joint Federal-Provincial Review Panel issued a report denying the approval of the Grassy Mountain Coal Project, with the primary rationale being that the project was not in the public interest. Our courts held that up in 3 separate decisions because the project's negative environmental impact was far greater than any supposed benefit. Despite the project being rejected in 2021, the UCP later deemed the Grassy Mountain Coal Project an advanced project and therefore exempted it from any so-called ban on coal mining. In late 2023, the company filed a new exploration application to renew the Grassy Mountain Coal Project, similar to the same one that had already been shot down twice. The only thing that has changed is that this new exploration proposal was bigger and with more drilled test pits. No improvements were made to the proposal, yet by early 2024, this exploration application was accepted and moved to public hearing. Unfortunately, the lies and secrecy continue. This government will continue to hide thousands of pages of documents and will now fight these ranchers in court again with an appeal. How many pages are missing? We don't actually know, but maybe about 5,000. Where are these 5,000 additional pages the government originally said existed? Well, they've vanished, and we don't know where. The UCP says nothing here. 5,000 pages are gone, and that's that. You know, these ranchers are being gaslit by their own government, and that's shameful. I don't know how the government thinks Albertans should buy this. The UCP has shown time and time again that they don't believe Albertans deserve all the information on their plans to mine Grassy Mountain and the eastern slopes for coal. They refuse to hold proper consultations. They've never taken Albertans' rightful concerns about clean drinking water and preserving the Rockies seriously. And now they expect Albertans to believe that those 5,000 pages of records about coal mining aren't relevant or that they don't even exist. Give me a break. If the government doesn't want to release these pages, people will come to their own conclusions about what they contain. And I can tell you, after discussing this issue with cattle ranchers, those conclusions aren't good. The hardworking cattle ranchers who would rather focus on growing our food than chasing the UCP government around for more information have lost their trust in this government. Now back to Rachel.
So with all this, we are here today simply to do this. First of all, we are calling on this government to release all 6,359 pages today, and that they release them in a form that is not redacted. The government must also drop their appeal and stop bullying Albertans who are just trying to save our Rocky Mountains from being torn apart by Danielle Smith. Thank you, and we're happy to take any questions folks might have.
All right, thank you. We'll now go to questions, first in person.
Yay. I just wanted to ask you about the broader issue here of the documents. In court, basically, the UCP government argued, well, we have to keep these secret because if we don't, you're messing with the whole cabinet kind of confidentiality thing, and if we did that, it would mean huger issues for how we can govern. Mm-hmm. You've obviously been in government. Mm-hmm. What is your response to that argument?
They are overswinging grossly with that particular argument. Yes, cabinet confidentiality is important, and documents that reflect the actual deliberations of cabinet need to be managed carefully so that cabinet can make their decisions in a fair and objective way. However, stamping cabinet document on 5,000 documents and saying that people don't have access to them as a result is ridiculous. Nobody in cabinet reads 5,000 pages before a cabinet meeting. Sorry, doesn't happen. That would be a heck of a long cabinet meeting. And so it is just a gross overuse of an exemption, and that's, of course, what the court said. The court said there's no rational connection between these documents and this particular exemption, and I agree.
Can you see a time at which they are going to release these documents, though, given that and I'm talking about the UCP government, in that they've already spent 4 years fighting against releasing this stuff? Are you actually hopeful they will turn around and release it?
Well, I have to say, Emma, I'm very surprised that we're here today. I asked the Premier about this issue in question period last week. I specifically said, now that the courts have made this decision, will you commit to releasing all the documents with no further delay? And she stood up and she said, yes. And she sat down. And so I literally thought that they were going to move on and make this a mistake of the past government. And that was the language they were using in different contexts. And now what we see is that, no, they're not releasing any further documents, and they're going to court to fight for their right to keep all these deals behind closed doors secret. Deals that impact an asset that every Albertan has a profound multi-generational interest in.
All right, we'll just switch over to the phones really quick. Just a reminder for those joining us on the phone to use *9, and for those on Zoom to use the raise hand function. Our first question comes from Bob Weber. Go ahead, Bob, your line is open.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Okay. Just for fun, what do you think is in those documents?
Well, I suppose one could speculate wildly, given that they, and we'd be entitled to do that. But, listen, I suspect that there's lots of inappropriate conversations between lobbyists and representatives of certain coal companies and political lobbyists and political staff and ministers trying to cut a deal to give access to these companies in order to mine the eastern slopes of our Rocky Mountains. That's, I think, what we're going to find. I think we're going to find evidence that they were conspiring to work around the rules and giving them advice on how to do that. But I don't know. At the end of the day, Bob, here's what I do know. We have a right to this information. This is a matter of great public interest. The UCP has been caught lying, black and white, lying to Albertans on at least 3 occasions here. For the first 6 to 12 months after this issue first started to arise, the minister at the time, Jason Nixon, repeatedly got up and said, there is nothing going on, there is nothing to see here. And then when they finally got caught out, they tried to argue that it was good for the environment and they were going to consult, even as they were shutting down consultations. And then they subsequently tried to tell us that they changed their mind and that they were not going to go ahead with it. And we found out that no, this had been happily being worked on, again, behind closed doors with friends and insiders against the wishes of Albertans. So at a certain point, these guys have to apologize for repeatedly lying to Albertans, and they have to be held accountable for it.
Do you have a follow-up, Bob?
I do. The government has made the argument, both in the House and to me, that they were simply following through on an initiative that was started under your government. And, that they point to the letter that Margaret McQuaid Boyd wrote to the AER discussing the coal policy. What's the difference between what your government was tossing around back in the day and what the UCP government actually did?
there's a huge difference. One, what Margaret was doing, or what Marg was doing, was essentially just articulating the process that was allowed for under the existing coal policy. There was no plan to change it. And we reserved in that letter our right to say no in accordance with the rules that were in place. And no decision had been made at that point. We were simply, for the purposes of ensuring that we followed the rules, essentially restated the policy, always reserving our right at the appropriate time in cabinet to make a decision not to go ahead. And so there was no divergence from the policy embedded in that letter. That is a letter that the UCP have torqued well beyond what it said and what it was meant to say all along. And under no circumstances were we encouraging any of the kind of expansion that the UCP rushed to move into as soon as they were elected.
We'll go to our next person online. Go ahead, caller. Your line is open. Please state your name and outlet.
Hi, this is Lana Michelin. I'm a reporter with the Red Deer Advocate, and sorry to have to change gears to ask a couple of local questions, but I was wondering if you could respond to Red Deer South MLA Jason Stefan's sort of slam poetry type.
We're not past it.
We'll go back to in the room for any further questions.
Actually, sorry, I'm just curious if you could clarify, is your primary message here that, Simon Jones sees me by the way, is your primary message that the UCP government's not being transparent, or is your primary message that they're supporting energy generation such as coal plants?
It's both things. First of all, the current judge basically said they're pretty flagrantly broken the law and ignored freedom of information rights in a way that undermines our democracy overall as a principle. And rather than apologizing and releasing the documents and apologizing for the 4 years over which they acted deeply inappropriately, they've doubled down. They're continuing to keep stuff hidden, and they're now appealing for their right to keep things hidden and to essentially eliminate Albertans' freedom of access to their own information. The second thing is that, absolutely, I mean, they are continuing to go ahead with plans to try and mine our Rocky Mountains. They are lying to Albertans about it all along the way, and they should stop because it is a bad idea to mine the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains.
Follow-up, Scott?
Simon, sorry.
Simon.
That's okay. Just in the current economic climate, obviously it's not 2019 or 2021 anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If folks are seeing their energy bills lowered, I guess I'm just wondering do you think this will resonate with folks out there when, you know, I think it's arguable at this time if they see their energy bills going down, they're just going to be happy no matter how it's coming.
Well, there's a bunch of issues embedded in there. This coal mine is not designed to be burned the coal from it to be burned on Alberta's electricity grid as a first thing. Secondly, I would argue that in the long term, burning coal on our grid as a form of generating electricity will cost us more in the long run because of the cost of climate change and also the cost to our health from burning coal. So getting us off coal is both a short term had a neutral impact on our energy prices, and long term will save us a lot of money. The reason our electricity costs are going up have to do with a whole bunch of other mismanagement decisions taken by the UCP. Their reference to coal is another one of their efforts to distract people and provide misinformation. It is not an answer to the challenges we face in terms of our utility prices. And in the long run, in this particular type of coal, where it's located, it will cost us more because it will poison our water system. It will undermine the integrity of the watershed that 2/3 of Alberta relies on right now.
Thank you.
And we'll do another pass online for questions. And with no further questions in the queue, we'll wrap today. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks.